This is Let's Talk About Myths, baby. And I am your host, Liv, here today with a very special episode. So, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Dr. Kira Jones, who is a classicist, but often specializes in classical reception in video games. And so, obviously, we were going to talk about Kassandra, because how could we not? So yes, this is an episode explicitly about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and specifically the use of the character Kassandra, and her as a female primary character in a major video game, all of the drama that caused, but also how important it was, along with just so much about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the accuracies, the way they did everything, how magnificent the game is. I obviously am obsessed with it. Now, one thing of note, and the reason this is a bonus episode, is that it does contain spoilers for the game. So if you are particularly concerned with not having the storyline of the game spoiled for you, maybe wait to listen to this episode until you have played it. I think when we get deep into the spoilers, I believe I make a spoiler notice, but at the same time, overall, it's fairly spoilery because it's hard to talk about this game as a whole without getting into the nitty-gritty of the storyline and everything that comes with it, because the storyline, while much of it is fictional, uses almost exclusively real people from Greek history in its story, which is fascinating in itself, but also just, causes a lot of spoilers. But truly, this was such a fun conversation. I'm deeply obsessed with this video game. I cannot stop playing. I'm not a gamer by the fact that I keep saying video game too, but truly, it was so much fun. I love Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I absolutely am obsessed with Kassandra as a character and everything about her. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Kira Jones, all about Kassandra. Conversations. Kassandra, hero of Sparta. Assassin's Creed Odyssey with Dr. Kira Jones. So I am here today with Dr. Kira Jones to talk all about Kassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, because why the hell not, I think, is the real question.
Yeah, the question is why wouldn't we be talking about Kassandra, really?
Exactly. I talk about Assassin's Creed Odyssey far too much now for a game that's been out for a couple of years, because I've only just recently started playing it. So we might as well dive right into that. Kassandra is an absolute badass, if entirely fictional.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, she's just so iconic. But a lot of the work that I've been doing on her has been why she pisses so many people off.
Ooh, actually, yeah, I should start off with so why did you pick Kassandra? What about her is kind of in your wheelhouse?
Right, yeah. So I do a lot of work on antiquity in video games. I've been, a video gamer since I was tiny. So, once I actually got out of grad school, I realized, hey, I can do whatever the hell I want now. So I'm going to work on video games. And that was about when Assassin's Creed Odyssey came out. So, I started diving into the material culture that they used. And of course, I discovered Kassandra. And, it was, I'd like to say it was shocking, but it was not that surprising that so many people were upset by not just her inclusion as the canon main character, but her inclusion in the game at all. So, a lot of my other work on the game since then has been trying to figure out, what is it about Kassandra that, is so disturbing to, so many people.
Interesting. Okay, so bear with me too. So I am not a video gamer. I had an N64 when I was too old, I think, already to have an N64, and then never really upgraded past that until in November, I think it was, enough people told me I should play Assassin's Creed Odyssey that I bought a used PS4 explicitly to play.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, it is the first video game beyond the Nintendo 64 of the late 90s that I have ever played.
What a great one to start with, though.
Right? I mean, it's first and only. Like, I still have not played anything else. It's kind of blown my mind. And now everyone's like, well, you have to play this, you have to play that. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But, like, let me just have this moment where I just only play Assassin's Creed Odyssey forever. So I've, like, I beat the main game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I accidentally overwrote it when I, like, was just about to get to Atlantis, or had just gotten, or not Atlantis, I should say, but Elysium. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and then so I had to do it all again from scratch, but I still play on easy because I find it more fun to just be better at the game. So now I'm like, I'm in Atlantis, and Cassandra's a badass, and I just kind of play the easy level all the time because it's really entertaining.
Yeah, definitely. I usually go for like story mode when I'm first starting out in a game, because like I don't want to worry about keeping myself alive when I'm trying to figure out the story.
So what does that mean exactly? Is there a way to, like, an even easier way than I've been playing, or I have no idea what I'm doing? Clearly.
Yeah, I think that I mean, the easiest way is to just go through discovery mode, but you miss out on the story that way, and you just get like their guided tours, and you can run around the world and stuff. They set it up as kind of like a big sandbox with tours sprinkled around the major cities. So if you want to like just run around Greece in the 5th century without random bandits attacking you out of the blue, then that's your best bet. But if you actually like want to do quests and stuff, then easy mode is probably what I would recommend.
So that's definitely where I started. I have done a couple of the discovery tours, but then I feel like I just started at the Acropolis, and I was like, no, I want to play the game. But then the game throws you directly into the Persian War.
Yeah.
And, like, Thermopylae. And I'm like, for real? Because again, like, this is the first game I've ever played in my life. Mm-hmm. And the first time I've held a PlayStation controller. And I've got 2 joysticks, and I'm like, and then suddenly you're having to fight people. And oh my God, I gave up fully for a bit, and then was like so mad that I gave up that I went back. And then I realized you really just do have to like swing a sword enough that they will eventually die. It's not trying to kill you. But it's a very stressful way to start a game when you have never played a game before.
I mean, usually people are just like, okay, press the W key to walk. Do this to open your inventory. And Odyssey is like, okay, here are 1,000 Persians. Have fun.
Yeah, and then I did it again, like, because I basically ended up playing a section of, or a huge chunk of it 3 times because of overwriting my game. Because I played with Cassandra, beat it, and then was like, I want to play with Alexios and be an asshole and like just pick all the meanest interactions and see how that goes. But then he was my only one, so I had to redo it again with Cassandra and enjoy it again. So I swear the 3rd time it gave me instructions. It was like, press this to swing your sword or whatever. And I was like, well, this is the 3rd time playing. How is this the time I get instructions? Like, it's a little late now. But I mean, when you get into the game, it is really like the greatest thing I've ever experienced as just like an obsessed person with ancient Greece. It's like, it's unbelievable how well they've made it.
Oh yeah. I mean, they did the work for sure.
Yeah. I feel like I want to play the other games people are recommending to me, but I don't think anything's gonna live up to this. So I'm more hesitant.
Yeah.
But Cassandra in general, so tell me about how much, like, I can assume a huge part of the hatred towards her is just straight misogyny, especially misogyny in gaming, because I remember Gamergate, even if I wasn't a gamer.
Yeah, everyone knew about that.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, tell me about that. What kind of mess exists that I've missed out on?
So much. I mean, like, first of all, in relation to Gamergate, there's a very long history of gaming being considered a masculine space. And first of all, that's flat out untrue. The idea that, it's only like 15 to 25-year-old guys who live in their mom's basement that play games is just untrue. There have always been, women, bi people, queer people, everyone plays games. But the narrative that everyone has been screaming about has been that it's this masculine pursuit. So, women either don't admit that they play it, or they just, assume, okay, well, that's not a girl thing. So, I'm not really a gamer, but I play Candy Crush is a thing that I hear a lot. It's like somehow smartphone games are safe. But I mean, like, they're games too. So
Yeah.
yeah, you've got this idea that gaming is a masculine space. And then you've got the other half of the equation, which is that antiquity is also a very white masculine space.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much you read up on like the alt-right use of classics and stuff.
I know enough.
Enough, yeah.
I have never sought it out all that much, but I mean, it even comes to my Twitter now and again.
Yeah, the Faros Project is a great collection if you ever just want to get like really mad at the world. They document everything in kind of like an online archive so that you don't give the actual original websites clicks or views or stuff, but you can still see what's going on. Antiquity in Greece in particular gets used as a way to prop up a lot of neo-Nazi, racist, misogynistic ideas, and anything that comes into conflict with that, for example, exploring 5th century Greece in the body of a badass woman who doesn't care what anyone thinks, that is going to be very, very contentious for a particular group of people.
Yeah, I mean, even simply my 1-star reviews are basically that in itself, like, aside from gaming, just like angry dudes who don't like that I talk about women sympathetically in ancient Greece. So I can only imagine how much it came at a game that not only had Kassandra at the forefront, but also she is not that like video game women's body, that quote unquote, like, she's not like the early Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
I mean, I even remember, like, I heard peripherally about how mad people were that they gave Tomb Raider smaller boobs in a more recent version or something. I don't know the details, but so I can only imagine like Kassandra, who's like this feminine but incredibly muscular.
Yeah, she is all muscle.
She is hardcore. And yeah, I can only imagine that, on top of everything else, could only make dudes more angry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's this idea that, if you have to play as a female character, then she better be sexualized.
Yeah.
Because then I can be a voyeur while I'm playing her as well, and that makes the interaction okay. But you don't get that with Kassandra, which is refreshing and great, and we need more of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's just an absolute badass throughout the game. I mean, she's also just so well acted and everything too. Like I said,
she really is.
She's just perfect. Like, I've played with Alexios and I was like, why is he like this? Like, he's just kind of obnoxious. And I'm like, there's nothing about Kassandra that's obnoxious.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the level of anger and everything, how did it kind of manifest itself? Like, I mean, I guess I don't want to get too into how people are awful or just how awful they are.
Right.
But I suppose, I mean, I'm not going to say it surprises me because, again, like, I am in the world and I'm a feminist in the world of Greek mythology. So, like, I get it.
Yeah.
But it kind of surprises me that it just, nothing surprises me about this, but I'm interested to hear more about it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're interested, I've been doing some work lately on like why video games, especially historical video games, can change people's perceptions on history, which, gets into this particular thorny issue kind of interestingly. No, I mean, when they first announced that Kassandra was going to be a character, you had all the dude bros on the internet freaking out on Reddit saying that, this isn't historically accurate. I'm not going to buy the game. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, you can pretty much fill in whatever they were saying because they always say the same thing. And, it was probably within the past year that it came out that the writing team actually wanted Kassandra to be the only playable option. That was the original idea, but management at Ubisoft said, no, you need to have a male character in there. So that's how Alexios came in. And then marketing decided that they were pretty much only going to feature Alexios. So even though Kassandra was supposed to be the main character from the beginning and was conceived and written and designed that way, we still get this perception that, oh no, she's just kind of this option that was thrown in to appease people. When I mean, really, it was structured to make Alexios, you know, the badass Spartan, you know, masculine fantasy.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I mean, not shocking that they would kind of force a male character and that he would get taken over. But I'm happy to hear that it was kind of built around Kassandra, and that answers some questions I had too. So, and this is going to be a spoiler for the game if anyone doesn't want to get spoiled, but I completed the Daughters of Artemis quest line, and I was like, how would this apply to Alexios? Like, do you know do they like make Alexios like the head of the Daughters of Artemis?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, that just seems wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess not to, like, you know, reverse what is and is not historically accurate, but like, come on. Like, I mean, Artemis wasn't about to let a dude run things.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, that was that one quest. Like, I think there's a couple where I was like, this would be interesting as Alexios, but that one specifically, I was like, this would be very bizarre if I was playing at Alexios. Meanwhile, it's a great quest line in general. I was very excited to have survived that.
I didn't know what they were going to do with the Daughters of Artemis when, like, before the game came out, because they had kind of, like, I think they had included that in one of the demos. So, like, everyone knew there was something about the Daughters of Artemis in there, but I didn't know anything beyond that. So I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it's great. It makes trying to complete those locations really annoying because I'm not going to kill them. But I raid all their chests at least.
Oh yeah.
There's so many things it's interesting just as somebody who hasn't played like intensive video games before. Like, for one, I knew how incredible they'd gotten and, you know, how broad and everything, but playing it for the first time and having this be it just like I physically can't stop, and it's just like the most exciting thing ever. Oh, the whole game being built around Kassandra is really fascinating, and the fact that it is so all about family and all of that. And yeah, I mean, Alexios does he seems out of place. Like, he just feels clunkier than she does.
Yeah, he worked well as an antagonist.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. He just as a main character, he's just not quite fitting into the puzzle.
Yeah, and then similarly, Kassandra as an antagonist also feels wrong. I didn't play that deep into Deimos as Kassandra before I screwed my whole game up and then went back to playing Kassandra, so I haven't gone back to Alexios, but yeah, it was just interesting having played Kassandra first and then deciding I was gonna to see what it was like with a male character in there.
Right.
Yeah, because again, I just play it so much that I'm like, well, I should at least like play it, you know, it again kind of, but slightly differently, so I'm not just straight playing the exact same storyline again. Now, beyond Kassandra, I'm curious about your thoughts on the Fate of Atlantis DLC. I find myself not as big of a fan of it as I would like, and I'm curious. How do you think about it as a classicist?
Yeah, I think that that they did some interesting things with it. So have you gotten beyond Elysium yet, or?
Yeah, I'm in Atlantis now doing that stuff.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't spoiling anything for you.
But again, for listeners, spoilers.
Right.
So listen as you will.
I mean, on the one hand, it's a game set in ancient Greece, so, you know, there are going to be people that want to throw Atlantis in there. You know, say what you will about the conspiracy theories. The way that they fit the mythology into the historical side, I find very interesting. Because, I mean, on the one hand, you already have all of this Isu lore built into the Assassin's Creed franchise. You've got this precursor race who, you know, explains all of this mythology, whether it's Roman or Egyptian, biblical. They've kind of taken all of that and, you know, turned it into Isu lore. so that they can then include that in their games.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's a clever way to actually like bring in mythical characters like Persephone and Hades and Cerberus. And, even in the base game, when we're talking about Medusa and the Sphinx, I mean, they are, actual people that have been, not cursed by gods, but kind of infected by these Isu artifacts. So it's the same basic idea as the myths, but they're putting that kind of like sci-fi twist on it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you look at this progression through the Greek underworld, through the Isu lens, it makes a little bit more sense. But, I also really like what they did with Persephone.
Mm.
I think that she is fabulous. I love that she's so angry all the time.
I enjoyed that she was so angry. I wish they hadn't taken power away from her in the way that they did. Like they just sort of made, they just kind of made her a bit more of like a pawn than I would have liked. Yeah, I can't say the Elysium one specifically for me. And again, like I'm coming at it not from an Assassin's Creed point of view.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I had no idea what all that issue stuff was. So to me, I was just more, I think it was more frustrating because it was overwriting this thing that I'm deeply, wildly obsessed with.
Right.
With this seemingly alien technology, which, causes its own kind of problems beyond like attributing this kind of thing to aliens. So, and I know there's so much more to it that I just don't know because I haven't played anything else Assassin's Creed, but I found that like a little bit harder. The first time when I got to Elysium, I did like just the entry thing and I was like, oh my God, I hate this so much. I'm not going back. And then I did go back mostly because I moved into a new apartment. I didn't have internet for a while. And so I just was like, well, the thing I can do to pass the time is play Assassin's Creed. So I guess I'm just going to go to Elysium and figure it out. And then by the time I got to the underworld, I was like, okay, no, I like this. Like, I really like what they do with the underworld. Yeah, I wanted a little bit more from the goddesses. And they were like, the fact that she and Hecate were fighting and they were a little petty. It got to me a little, but ultimately, I mean, I think it's an interesting way they've done it. The Medusa, I loved.
Oh, she was so fabulous.
Yeah, you recently retweeted like an old thread about her, right? I read through that whole thing and was like, oh my God. Just all about I mean, Medusa in general is obviously somebody I focus a lot of time and energy on, and I like to troll the internet about. But yeah, her in the game, she's a very fascinating character and very hard to kill.
yeah, no, she's definitely one of the toughest fights in there. Deservedly so, I think. She should be hard.
Yeah, I love that she was.
Yeah,
like she's certainly the most. I've had the most trouble with her out of anyone. Hades kind of bugged me for a while too, but
yeah, he's kind of a jerk. But...
yeah. And as you pointed out and I missed, he throws a chair at you.
I love that.
Yeah, I think I recently did a Q&A on the podcast about Assassin's Creed because I was like, I just want to talk about this. And there were some interesting questions because I think unless and I don't have a huge background in Greek history. I just have my BA that was like an overview of classics in general. But even that has been able to help me in my knowledge of what is and is not real. So it was interesting having people come at it without any of that and asking me what was and was not invented. And of course, like the majority is not invented, which is very cool. Like the majority is like wildly historically accurate. This is a total departure, but now I'm thinking about it. Do you know anything about the followers of Ares in the game versus anything resembling reality?
Yeah, I think those are completely invented.
Yeah, that's what my research showed me as well.
Yeah.
They're fun. I like them.
They are. I mean, if you're going to have like a weird cave dwelling, cannibalistic, cult in your game, it makes sense that they would follow Ares.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I'm like reassured that my knowledge was sound, but also kind of disappointed that there wasn't anything quite like that. I mean, maybe not the cannibalism. I didn't really ever think the Greeks would go there. But just like the level of violence in those characters is
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, they're on another level. For
Yeah.
sure.
Getting used to a game where you have to kill everybody all the time was a very interesting thing. And like how you kind of deal with feeling bad about the people that you have to kill. The fact that you have to kill Cerberus within like a split second of
I know.
starting this game, such a bummer.
That's one of the things that I really appreciate about the Hades game by Supergiant is that you have to get past Cerberus, but you bribe him.
I like
and
that.
it becomes this running joke where it's like you get this big message, Cerberus vanquished, and then underneath, not really. Because he's just gone back to the house with his sack of disgusting meaty bits that you've given him.
I mean, that's how, like, Cerberus doesn't get killed in the mythology, so no
Yeah.
one should have to kill him.
Exactly.
Guy. Yeah.
Don't kill the dog. I don't care if it's a hell dog. Just don't kill it.
That's the thing I have the most trouble with in the game is when the dogs attack you.
Yeah.
But Kassandra generally, so do you have any thoughts about how they went about, having this woman character who is so strong and is so ahistorical in a great way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I'm curious kind of how they approach that, given there wouldn't have been women like that broadly in the ancient Greek world.
Yeah, I mean, I think for one thing, they were really looking closely at mythology, because of course we have the Amazons, we have characters like Canis, we've got a number of strong women who take up martial duties in mythology. So it's not like the idea was foreign, and I do want to push back a little bit at the idea that women were supposed to be confined to the house, because that's very much an elite Athenian idea. It was not reality. And
Great.
once you get to other places like Sparta, especially, I mean, we don't have nearly as much information on Sparta as we do on Athens because, things just don't get preserved in that part of Greece as well as they do elsewhere. And, I mean, Athens was really in a position to kind of control the narrative, and they didn't like Sparta. So, of course, you're going to put out all of these crazy stories about, women like shaving their hair so that when they spent the night with their husband would think they were a boy or whatever.
Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah. There's a bunch of weird conspiracy theories around Sparta. And a lot of like the super masculine ideals as well are coming out of Athenian writings. So, I mean, yes, they were definitely a very militaristic society. They had a slave class. They were very much into having a strong land-based military, but you were also able to have women with a lot more power there. So we get Kyniska of Sparta, who, she wasn't a warrior. She did figure out how to become a victor at the Olympic Games.
Amazing.
She realized that basically the person who owned the horse team was the one who got the prize. So she was elite. She was independently wealthy. So she bought her own chariot team, and then she got to become Kyniska, victor of the chariot race.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so I mean, we have Spartan women that are making things happen. We've got buildings that are dedicated by women, and well, it wasn't necessarily like a widespread thing. I mean, I think that saying that there were no women warriors in ancient Greece is probably a fallacy, because we have no way to prove that one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, as far as historical examples, we've got strong women like Kyniska. We've got a lot of the Hellenistic queens, especially, had a huge amount of power. I mean, Cleopatra, obviously, but also Arsinoe. We've got the burials at Vergina, where the queen actually had like Amazon style armor and an arrow quiver that were probably actually hers that she used. So I mean, there's stuff out there.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm so glad you said all that. That's great. I mean, I think my knowledge, again, like the history is not, it's broad, my knowledge, but also it is so based in Athenian propaganda and just Athenian in general.
That's the problem, is that everything is. We've got centuries of studies of Greece and Rome that are based in the idea that these, very biased texts that we have preserved are absolute truth. And it's just not. There's a lot of useful information we can get, but they're biased. There's no way around that.
They're important, but they're certainly, it's not like anyone ever has written without any kind of bias. Like it's impossible in humanity. And so, but it does become so much trickier to flesh out what is and is not real when that's the only source you have. It's a fascinating thing trying to deal with that. And even that's why I kind of like caught myself saying it. So say like broadly there weren't women like that, but it's true. Like certainly like you have examples I didn't even know about, but I always try to catch myself, or I shouldn't say always, when I think of it I try to catch myself from being too cut and dry in stuff that is pretty clearly Athenian or just based in the the limited sources that we do have. But that's so interesting. And I think that was something that I found fascinating when I was starting the game, is that I kind of originally came at it almost more sympathetic to the Athenians, because that is just like what I know and what I've learned. And then the game really, I don't think they explicitly want you to pick a side, but if they were going to have you pick a side, that side is Sparta. And I think that's really fascinating and definitely a departure from the norm. Like we're saying, like so much of what we have is Athenian, that tends to be the people we go to talk about Greece broadly, when it was just like one city state amongst so many others. So it's interesting to have that be Sparta, and to just get all the different regions and the way that so many different city states, but it's it's so so it's interesting to have all of that, because you're still doing, I don't want to say late Greece, but sort of like height of the Greece that we know of. So they are pretty Hellenized, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but everyone's connected in that way. But it's still so interesting to be able to see all the different regions and how they're handled, and basically I'm just obsessed with this game.
It's so good. I think we should definitely talk about diversity in the game. So, like the pirate queen, I love her. She's great.
You mean Zinnia?
But she's she's black. She is very much like a fuck around and find out type of person. She is in
so
charge.
Loyal. She's so loyal and hardcore, and makes you go on some pretty crazy quests with those really difficult maps. Sorry to bring you back to the game.
No, I hate those maps.
The maps are like impossible to distinguish. My God. But no, I do think, diversity in general in this game is like in terms of different races and people, but then also in different sexualities and everything is mind-boggling. But yeah, I think Zinnia is she's such a good example, because she takes up a huge part of the game ultimately in terms of like the quests that you have to run for her. I think she's a fascinating study, and that you get to flirt with her.
Yes.
So she's not just like there to be a badass, but you can choose to have her also be sexualized, which I think is also important and definitely, like, I would imagine not something that exists in a ton of mainstream video games.
Seduction is a pretty big thing in video games, just because of the whole masculine idea of wanting to seduce women. So like in God of War, I think it's God of War 2 or 3, there's a storyline where you go to talk with Aphrodite, and she is basically like obsessed with you and immediately wants to sleep with you. And she's got these two handmaidens. So like, you are in the middle of this mini game where you are essentially plowing Aphrodite by clicking your button repeatedly. You've got the two handmaidens in the corner who are also getting it on, watching you, and it's like,
Oh my
okay, this is
God.
A, very unnecessary, but B, it's very clear who the audience is supposed to be for this, and so you get a lot of stuff like that where it's very clearly meant to be for heterosexual male players who want to see the pretty girl naked,
Yeah.
either with their character or with another girl. And I think with Zinnia in particular, one, we don't get a cutscene, which gives them a little bit more autonomy, which is nice. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, also the interaction is very much between Kassandra and Xenia. It's not presented as something that's really voyeuristic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how you viewed it, but I kind of got the idea that like if someone was being a voyeur, then Xenia would just beat the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's sexualized, but in the very broad sense of the term. It's not sexualized in the way that I think, yeah, like you're saying with God of War and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in the way that like you can choose to she's almost romanticized more than anything else. Like you can choose to have like a romantic interaction, which is the case for most of the like seduction moments in the game, is that most of them are like romantic in nature, which I think is also kind of nice. Like it's not easy to make your character a creep.
Right. It can be done, but it's not easy.
Yeah, it's the game is not like immediately prepared to let you make them a creep.
Right.
Also, not most, but I mean, I think possibly more than half of the seduction moments or like the romantic moments are with women. And so the idea that that Kassandra was the original player of the game, I think is also important in that way. It's an interesting thing to be. I mean, for one, I think it's important that you can make your character whatever, but also that it is, there's so many very like tender, nice interactions you can have between women.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to the point of like why Kassandra is such a controversial figure. I mean, it's one thing to like watch a movie on ancient Greece or read a book about it because you're kind of a spectator to the narrative. When you're playing a video game, it's a very physical thing. You are the one that is actually driving the choices. You are like physically using your body to move your character around. So, when you play as Kassandra, you are, experiencing life in ancient Greece through your choices in ancient Greece. And I think that's especially powerful with a historically based video game like Assassin's Creed, because it's clearly not mythical. It's clearly meant to have, at least some bearing on reality. But, by playing as Kassandra, you're opening up this world of ancient Greece to, a really, really diverse audience. And you're saying that, women have a stake in this. Black women, queer women, queer people, people of color, all of these groups that have been historically excluded from, this Greek colonial narrative suddenly are welcome into this historical game universe and are able to experience it. And I mean, that is the sort of thing that gets people interested in history. It gets them, into classics, into actually researching it, into rewriting the narratives. And I think that is, very dangerous for a lot of people who are really committed to keeping this, white, heteronormative, patriarchal view of ancient Greece intact.
Yeah, dangerous is a good word for that, and I like it. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think, I mean, certainly like the sexual diversity is very interesting in the game, but like you're saying too, like people of color are fully represented, and I think that's both important from the standpoint of the video game itself, but also historically accurate in a way that, like you're saying, we get this white colonial narrative of classics that suggests that, one, it seems to suggest that Greek people were a lot paler than they actually would have been, and two, that it was explicitly like European type white that would have existed in places like Greece and Rome, which is utter nonsense given like everything to do with the Mediterranean and how their cultures interacted with the entire Mediterranean region. And so, yeah, I think to have people so well represented, and like nobody in the game is particularly white, which is accurate. And I think, yeah, it's very clear that they both did it because I think it's important in our world today in general, but also because it's historically accurate.
Yeah. And I also love that they use like actual Greek voice actors with accents. They didn't go like for the next British person that they could find. I mean, there's a reason that Greek people always get cast as British actors, and that reason is colonialism and racism. But they actually brought in Greek people to do the voiceovers. They used modern Greek for the background dialect, and again, that goes a long way towards welcoming more people into this universe.
Yeah, that's very true. It's funny, that's something that I like noticed, but it didn't stand out to me in the way that I think it should have, given I have seen all of, reception, like popular Hollywood movies where they're always so British, and it drives me so crazy every time, mostly because they often are like regionally British, and I'm like, you're not even using like a straight, just like generic. It's like, I mean, that's why I couldn't keep watching Troy Fall of a City. I was like, what this is like Northern British accents.
Yeah, that's the one on Netflix, right?
It's on Netflix. Yeah, I think BBC did it though, or it was.
Yeah, originally. After the Judgment of Paris episode, I couldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just their whole Athena got to me so much.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics. I just remember, like, for one, even I'm pretty sure it looked like they'd filmed it in the UK, where it was like, if I recall, it looked very much like my climate, which I'm like, I do not live in a Mediterranean climate, unfortunately. I live in like Canada's England. So yeah, I mean, and between that and then the very regional accents, I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. No, like I'm just
nope, right out of that.
No, and it's one of those things where I'm like, it's like I could do this or I could not. Though at the same time, I that's how I got away with talking about Assassin's Creed Odyssey for a long time, is people would tell me to play and I was like, I don't play video games. And not there's anything wrong with that, but when you've only held an N64 controller, the idea of picking up something with all the buttons and two joysticks,
it's intimidating. Yeah,
it's very intimidating. And I'm just like, that's all I've done. It's funny now, but I'm very glad that I finally, it's because I became full-time at the podcast and I was like, okay, this is it now, because I knew that if this game was as good as everyone told me, that it would take over my whole life. And I was right, and so thank God that I had the time, because I think I clocked in like 100 hours in the first month.
Like, I believe it. Yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly you do get used to a controller, but also just the mechanisms of it. I just figured I'd have so much more trouble with it than I did. But that's all to say, sometimes you finally listen to people telling you to play a game and they're absolutely right. And I should have done it much earlier.
Yeah.
Which means I should definitely play Hades. I know
this. And when you do, I will come back and talk about it with you, because I am obsessed with that game. So obsessed.
I've only heard amazing things. I should play it. But yeah, I think the level of diversity, both in terms of people of color, just non-white in general, and then also this ability, like the freedom in sexualities in that game, and then the freedom that women have, and the fact that there's kind of no indication of any kind of like second class citizenry when it comes to women. And I
mean, except for the slaves, but
yeah, certainly there are, unfortunately, they definitely have slaves. And I think it's interesting though that Sparta, they really do talk about the helots too.
Yeah,
I don't think you get like a lot of background, but I think it's important that they are definitely mentioned. Yeah, it's an interesting, it's just all around like a very great representation, but understanding it now, like the way you phrased it, of the way it would make people angry who are into that colonialist narrative of ancient Greece, I think it's even more important and sort of, I don't know, it's more fun because it would make those people angry.
yeah, that's definitely how I approach it.
Yeah, and especially Kassandra too. Like I should have, like I said, I should have assumed that she would have had that much, anger associated with her, but still, I'm kind of excited to hear about it now. She's such a badass in the whole game. I'm glad
she
she would have
is.
made shitty people angry.
Yeah. And I mean, you know that she wouldn't care about it either.
Not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. She doesn't, I mean, she just like, she knows her worth. She knows her strength. That's all that
Exactly.
matters.
Yeah.
The amount that I could talk about her as if she's a very real person that I interact with all the time.
Well, I mean, you do.
I know,
Like
exactly.
every day.
We're really good friends.
Yeah.
She and I. Yesterday I started it setting out, I was like, I'm just going to play for like an hour. I have so much to do. And then I was like, no, I'm not.
5 hours later.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm going to start at like 3 p.m. and just go until I go to bed.
You know, I think it's worth mentioning how many actual like ancient artifacts they brought into the game.
Yes, yeah. Let's just talk about the historicity and the ancient everything of it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I find it so interesting, like, A, what they picked, and B, how they use it.
Yes.
I mean, once you actually start looking at it, you can see that they're kind of using the same, like, 3 inscriptions over and over and over again.
And the same, like, 5 statues.
Yeah, there's one inscription from Epidaurus about, I think it's about, like, a dog curing blindness or something. But it gets used on like chairs and in tombs and on steles and just like in the most random places. And I mean, once you know what it is, you're just like seeing this epitaph about the dog everywhere. It's kind of funny.
So cool. Yeah. I mean, I tragically don't, I'm working on it, but I don't know ancient Greek. So those things would have escaped me. For me, it's like a lot of the like architecture repetition and the statuary and things I find really interesting. But that's thrilling to know that like, yeah, that it is an actual inscription and that they just kind of put it everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about developing a huge game like this is that, you know, academics especially like to talk about how like people don't get everything exactly right. Like when you go to Delphi, you know, it's not like you know, everything from the original site is exactly copied. There's a lot of it there, but you know, on some of like the smaller temples, you're going to have some ahistorical reliefs, for example, or you might have like the Naxian Sphinx shows up, you know, a number of different places in Greece besides Delphi. And, you know, it's one thing for us to say it's inaccurate because we're used to pouring in hours of unpaid work to make something perfect. But I mean, this is a product where you have to actually, you know, monetize people's time. You have to put a price tag on that. So, I mean, there's a sliding scale of accuracy that you really have to keep in mind between, okay, how much can we put in and how little do we have to put in to make it seem historical? And I think that Assassin's Creed really hit on that balance pretty well. So, you know, they modeled a lot of the Parthenon frieze. For example, they've got, you know, the major buildings, and then they kind of take those apart and use it like a stamp. So you can find Parthenon reliefs on, you know, planters. They've turned it into frescoes for some buildings. You can find it on the actual Parthenon. And, you know, because you're actually focused on the quest or whatever you're doing, your brain just kind of registers it as, oh, that's ancient Greek. So I'm in an ancient Greek place. And, you know, unless you're specifically looking for it, or like me, you spend all of your day looking at these things anyways, and you're more important to recognize them, you know, it just kind of fades into the background as ancient Greekness.
Yeah, I think for most people, you would just look around and see kind of how realistic and immersive it is. And I think that's sort of the key. One of the things that stood out for me, because I definitely noticed the repetition, and certainly, the Parthenon reliefs are sort of on most temples, like the same relief is up in, or the same like frieze is up at the top. Is it frieze or whatever word I want to use? But and then, you know, the same little like sphinxes on the corners of the roofs of the temples and all of that. But then you get to some of the things that they've repeated, like all the when they want to convey Bronze Age in general, that I find really fascinating. For one, they seem to have kind of picked like one basic type of iconography and then used it for everything that when they mean Bronze Age, which I can understand why they would. And ultimately I think it just ends up really making the point where, like, yes, okay, technically most of what they did I think is pretty Minoan, and they kind of use it on any of the islands where they meant Bronze Age, and even the Mycenaean stuff is like, but you can tell they mean it's older. You can tell that they're referring to, like, I mean, for one, they're ruins, but still, you can tell that they're referring to an ancient culture that is more ancient than Kassandra, which is the main point to be conveyed. And then also you can see the differences. So I love that you can tell what is supposed to be Minoan architecture. You know, you can see the way they did the columns and the artwork inside and the colors. And
the colors are so good.
The colors are so good. Like when I first was playing this game and they told me to go to Odysseus's palace and steal Penelope's shroud, like I nearly cried. Like I was like, this is the greatest day of my life. Oh my God. And I got over there and I got into the palace ruins and then just literally like stared at every inch of it for as long as I could.
Yeah.
And that I think that palace is such a good example of what how they wanted to convey Bronze Age. And then they do have, like, they have mainland Bronze Age and then they have island Bronze Age. And I think that if you're even able to do that to convey that it wasn't the same culture across everywhere, like that is still like it's a little thing that they're doing, but it's conveying a lot of important historical, you know, accuracies. And obviously it's not fully accurate, but at the same time I think it like makes the point like historically that it's trying to make. And I think that's so important. And I mean the colors in general, I feel like we could go on forever about how it's actually colorful, which we get so infrequently when it comes to depictions of ancient Greece. But the colors are just so stunning and the way they use them, like I just want to live in it all the time. I just want to like exist in that world. But I would love to see, like, I don't even know. There's I just kind of lose my mind thinking about all of it too, and just the level that they were able to convey. Like, you know, there's so much I know is not historically accurate, but it's so close and so well done and so well researched. That it just comes across as incredibly impressive and historical. What are your thoughts on how they conveyed the like historical storylines of like the Peloponnesian War and the very real people involved?
I mean, I think it's great that, you know, they're bringing in, you know, people who aren't necessarily like the really big names. So you get to meet those big names. So you get to meet Pericles and Socrates and, you know, the various generals and stuff. But you also have, you know, other kind of more minor characters that can put a much more human touch on the war. And, you know, you kind of get to see the effect of war on like normal people. So it's not just looking at like a map of you know, battle lines, which is how we normally study the Persian War. But, you know, at the same time, you know, they've got to make it into a fun game, so they're weaving in this whole idea of the cult of Cosmos and this like secret, you know, society that's pulling the strings of the Greek world. Very Assassin's Creed thing to do. You know, they love that whole like shadowy cabal sort of. But I mean, at the same time, it kind of works well to explain the polis system as well. Because, you know, it's not just Athens. You know, you've got all of these different plots that are going on in the different cities as well that feed into the different sides during the war. You know, you can like work with either Sparta or Athens to flip allegiances. So it's, you know, they do a good job of kind of conveying the volatility of the situation, I think. Maybe not the actual war itself, but I mean, it's a video game.
Yeah, it would be very hard to weave in the cult of Cosmos, to weave in an ongoing game that can't have a like finale in that way, and then try to actually weave in an actual war. Like, or the details of an actual war, rather.
And I mean, the Peloponnesian War, it's, you know, it's not like it has like a really big finale and then it's just over. You know, it just kind of keeps on going.
Well, and it just like caused so much destruction
Mhm.
and trauma and everything. And I think that's what they convey really well.
Yeah.
Like when you are wandering those areas that are not Athens and Sparta, and you're having people, like so many of the like really quick little side quests that you can pick up are like basically just Cassandra says time and time again, like war, or I don't think this war is going to end anytime soon, or war hurts everybody. And they think they make that point pretty clear that it kind of involved everyone, but it wasn't necessarily like everyone actually had like strong feelings about it. It was like, oh, kind of who's ruling us now, Athens or Sparta? And I think that they make the point of it very well. I really enjoy when they like include real people in the cult of Cosmos, when you're like like change the things that would have happened to very real people and make them about that cult. I quite enjoyed it. It did lead me to have to explain to a few people in my Q&A that the cult of Cosmos is not at all real.
Or is it?
Well, I suppose we don't know. But I did enjoy that in like the way, because even this is big spoiler, people. Big spoiler.
Aspasia.
She was a real
Very
character.
real. Very, very real.
Which is very interesting. There was a few that I learned were real just by having people ask me about them.
Yeah.
I love Alcibiades, but I also don't know much about him as a real person. Do you have any thoughts on him, both real and Assassin's Creed Odyssey?
I mean, he is very much portrayed as his stereotype, which I think is hilarious, and I love him in the game.
He's very fun.
Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, you kind of get a sense of his cleverness as well. I kind of wish that we had followed his story a little bit further when he goes to Sicily, I think it is. And like we don't get the whole thing where he's kind of framed for breaking the penises off of all the Herms in Athens.
Sorry, I need you to tell me about that. He's framed for breaking penises off of Herms, which, by the way, I love Herms. I think they're so silly.
They really are. Yeah, so basically, he was not a hugely popular guy in Athens.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who were trying to get him exiled. He was exiled like 2 or 3 times. He ended up in Persia for a while. Then he convinced the Persian king that he could help him take over Greece. And then, he convinces people in Athens that he's still an ally, so they call him back. And then he gets exiled again. And, during one of these kind of transitions, there's this one guy, I forget his name. I'm terrible with names in the 5th century. But he basically says that Alcibiades is guilty of heresy because he went around and he broke all of the penises off the Herms in Athens during the night. And therefore he should be put to death because this is like a huge crime against the gods. Which, I mean, like, knowing what we know about Alcibiades in the game, it's...
I could see him doing that.
Yeah, he would do that, and he would use them. But...
Yeah,
I mean, I think Alcibiades was, on a ship somewhere, and had to kind of, hightail it out of there, because if he went back to Athens, he would be killed for that. And then eventually... I think he might have been cleared or something, but yeah, it's a funny story though.
I mean, that's great. That's what a thing to be accused of. I know it's very serious back then, but now it's very funny. And so to my listeners, a very quick description of a Herm would be, I don't even know their purpose, honestly. I don't know the historical nature of them. I just know that they are a person's head on a plinth, and then it just has a penis. So it's head, stone structure that does not resemble humanity, and then just a penis.
Right. So they're based on the god Hermes, which is why they're called Herms.
Makes sense.
But they're essentially like road markers. They denote kind of liminal spaces, and Hermes as this god who's very quick. He passes between a lot of spaces, underworld, mercantile. He's got all of this kind of liminal ability about him. He was also the god of crossroads and stuff like that. So, they would put him as these Herms at, crossroads, important points around the city. as kind of like a protective icon. But, he's also got this kind of fertility god aspect to him. So, he also gets this erect penis, which is, apotropaic and, funny, and it just fits somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's great. I'm glad to know a bit more about them. I just can picture the visual and I just find them wildly entertaining.
Yeah.
I'm very academic in my opinions about ancient Greek statuary. Herms are funny. I'm a professional. All the historical depictions just get me. Like I mean, the amount of time that I've just sort of wandered around this game and like looked real close up to everything. The one time that I do get bummed out is the amount that they do repeat, like friezes and basically interior artwork. You get to see like that amazing shot of Odysseus strapped to his ship while the sirens come at him, and it's beautiful, but then you see it everywhere and I'm like, I want more of them. I want like different ones to look at, but I understand why you had to repeat it. It's like,
yeah, I mean,
they're really labor intensive.
And they've got to push the game out in a few years, so eventually you have to move people beyond recreating vase paintings on walls.
Exactly.
And do things like, okay, let's actually make the game work.
Yeah. And I guess I like that it functions like really well. Yeah. I just want more artwork. But it is just so beautiful, and it is, it's just kind of mind-boggling. Like as somebody who just thinks constantly about what I wouldn't give to just wander around that ancient world, I think this is the biggest game changer for me, because I feel like I can kind of do it. It's also been huge for me in the pandemic, because all I want to do is to go to Greece.
Yeah.
But yeah, like wandering ancient Greece solves it, Yeah,
I mean, and that's another democratizing aspect of the game, especially in the classroom. If you've got students who will never be able to make it to Greece, this is a way for them to actually kind of experience that.
Yeah, that's so true. And it is such a good learning tool, I would imagine, in general, because, for all it's those little things you can pick out, like for the most part, it's got some major accuracies that I think would really open people's minds. And even in the way that we're talking about the diversity of people and sexualities and things, like I think even that alone is so important, to be able to see that ancient Greece had those ideals. Yeah. And that, that so many of those things were totally normal in that world, in a way that I think often gets forgotten by the people that have sort of taken on classics. Yeah. It's a beautiful game, basically. It is. Yeah. It's wonderful. Everyone should play it. Yeah. It's just the absolute best. Like I want to go play it now. I have stuff to do this afternoon and I can't. I'm already thinking about it. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking video games. When I play Hades, I'll absolutely have you back. Yes, definitely. I love that game so much. Oh yeah, I know it's got to be on my list. I need to, but it's all Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's all the time. Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much, Kira, for talking to me and using all your video game knowledge and classics knowledge. Is like the absolute perfect person to talk to you about this. I'm so glad you suggested it. A little peek behind the curtain, I put out a call for people to talk to me about like classical mythological women, and I just got a DM from Kira that just said Kassandra. I was like, yeah. Actually, I think it said, should we just go full nerd and talk Kassandra? Yeah, that was it. Like, and you're like, hell yes. Yeah. And then I felt a little awkward and clarified that we were talking about Assassin's Creed Odyssey Kassandra and not mythological Kassandra. I was like, I want to assume Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but like, I want to make sure that I'm not going to come into this and have you be like, so the Princess of Troy. And I'm like, oh, shit.
I mean, granted, she is also cool, but
amazing.
It's all about
thrilling.
Spartan Kassandra right now.
Exactly. I should have known that I tweeted enough about Odyssey that would have been who you're talking about. But really, thank you so much for doing this with me. And
thank you for having me. This is great.
Nerds, thank you all so much for listening. I mean, I think me calling you nerds really is emphasized in this specific episode because not only are we all nerdy for ancient Greece, but also video games in ancient Greece. Fuck, I love Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I hope you all found this as interesting as I did. As always, I love these conversations. They're just so much fun. And I have so much more coming this month and in the future. Thank you all so much for listening. You are the best. I am Liv, and I love this shit.
You never wait to hit the dance floor, so why wait for someday to book your family vacation? Seize your someday with Travelocity and book confidently.
I never say no to dancing or vacation. Let's go. Click here and book. Travelocity.